Thank you all for coming. Were you all here yesterday for all the festivities? I think I saw a lot of the same faces, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be able to do two things at the same time, to acknowledge all the suffering of the Tibetan people over these many decades and acknowledge March 10th for what it is, but at the same time to really celebrate His Holiness and the success that the Tibetan community has had in exile, in the diaspora. It's pretty unique. The great gift that this Tibetan community has given to the rest of the world is pretty extraordinary, and you can be deeply proud of it. And I'm proud of being in that family myself, as I'm sure everyone here is to be included and welcomed into. There was a poem by Rumi, a Persian poet, and there's a great line in that. This caravan is not a caravan of despair. And with the Tibetans, it's never a caravan of despair. It's always a caravan of possibility and visions. So I'm glad to share that all with you.
Well, very welcome. You were already quite extensively introduced by Tenzin a bit earlier before you came, so I'm not going to do that again. But I think it's very important to have somebody like you who also supports the Tibetan cause and who helps and who continues, because it's such a long fight, isn't it? And one of the words that came to my mind in the past couple of days, because there have been 3 different sessions, and of course the protest yesterday and all the talks yesterday, was resilience. Could you say something about the resilience that you've seen, that you've come across in the past 40 years?
Well, I'm thinking about Dharamsala. Remember, in Dharamsala, no one built to last. It was almost an insult to build houses that were going to last, because they're going back. And it was somehow putting a bad omen out there that we're establishing our community in Dharamsala when it was temporary, completely temporary, going back. And it's hard to maintain that feeling, for 60, 70 years and a couple of generations. But I think it's still there. It's still deep in the Tibetan DNA that they're going to go home. They will go home. And maybe not this year, but maybe this year or the next year, maybe His Holiness is able to go home and then come back. And somehow that will keep that connection alive, that possibility, and the promise that, yeah, we'll go back. But when, I forget when it was, I lose track of time, but when the first 1,000 Tibetans were welcomed into New York, it was a special program, into the US. And I was actually a naysayer. I said that they're not going to go to Minnesota, and they're not going to go to these small towns all over the US. They're going to go immediately to New York and probably end up going back to India. It just wasn't going to work, but I was wrong. And they rooted in these places all over the US and not only flourished in their own communities, but flourished with their American hosts in a way to make something more special for the Americans. And that has happened everywhere. I think Tibetans have that wonderful quality. Gelek Rinpoche, I don't know if you remember Gelek Rinpoche. He passed away maybe 5, 6 years ago. And he was one of my teachers, one of the first Tibetan teachers that I met. And he always said, our tragedy is your lucky day, because we wouldn't have had His Holiness without the Tibetan tragedy. We wouldn't have had the great teachers that have come to us in the West without their tragedy. So we're living in a kind of a really powerful age of communication. But as you were saying, one of the roots of that is that the resilience of the Tibetans to not only survive but to flourish wherever they go.
So to pick up on what you said, Tibetans have the Tibetan diaspora in many different places has given a lot to other people. That also has given a lot to you. What have you learned from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from Tibetan colleagues?
I mean, people ask me that all the time. And how do you answer a question like that? It's you know, you obviously learn from teachings, and you learn from books, and you learn from yourself in the process. But I think you learn more spending time with someone who has done the extraordinary work on themselves and is able to live it in the world. And I mean, I'm completely humble about this, but my incredible good fortune to be able to spend time in teachings with His Holiness with sometimes 500,000 people, where each one of us thinks that's a teaching directly to us individually. And then the times that I've had actual, you know, one-on-one moments with His Holiness, the way he's able to distill his religion, and just to say, look, my religion is kindness. It's a warm heart. And a warm heart is not that easy. It goes in profound places, but then to just generally call it a warm heart, you can't be obsessed with yourself and have a warm heart. It's impossible. So the softening of ego, the softening of what's in it for me, which is a basic kindness, I think is a valid thing for all of us to embrace and aspire to, without all the complications of Tibetan Buddhism. And it can be really complicated, of course, and really difficult. His Holiness's warm heart and feeling that's how he's communicated to 7 billion people on this planet. So
you said something about hope, where the session today is focusing on the future. And there is somehow a balance between despair and hope. How do you see the future? His Holiness is celebrating his 90th birthday. The movement has to continue.
Well, despair is pointless. That gets you nothing. So reject that out of hand. Nah, I'm not going there. Look, the reality is, which it's difficult for all of us to face, is that the Dalai Lama will drop this body, this human body. And of course he will continue, because his bodhisattva vows are so complete that he's not going to finish until we all get out of this craziness. I think it's throwing back the responsibility to all of us, in a way, to the Tibetan community, but all of us in the West who have been able to engage him, to even hear the word Dalai Lama, to see his face and take teachings. And it's a huge responsibility then to bring that into the world. And the responsibility is connected to the success and survival of Tibetan culture. They're not separate from each other. His Holiness came out of Tibetan culture. No other culture. It was Tibetan culture generated this extraordinary man. And I think when you see this, yes, it's possible because he did it. And as he keeps saying, look, I wasn't born with all this. I had to work very hard, and he still does. He's still up at 3 o'clock in the morning practicing. I say the future will emerge based on how much we grab the future and make it what we want it to be. We're all subject to causes and conditions, and we have to create the causes for the future we want. And a lot of that is just to continually talking. Silence is the death for all of us. Acceptance is the death of all of us. That's one of the most profound things. Silence only helps the bad guys. The silence that many countries have about China only helps the bad guys. So I think for all of us to find a way to communicate, small ways, big ways, it almost doesn't matter, but just keep communicating. With generosity, you know, not with anger about people, but anger about anger. Anger about stupidity, anger about violence.
So you talk about responsibility and you talk about we have to speak out, not just you, not just us here, but we in general. So what did you say to Dutch politicians these days? Did you talk to them? And what
Yeah, no, we had really good meetings yesterday. I was surprised at how educated they were on the subject and committed. And today also, we were in the Human Rights Ministry today. I have to be honest with you, it's very rare that I have found anyone over the last 35, 40 years that I've been trying to help the Tibetans who doesn't feel it for the Tibetans.
Yeah.
And there's always the compromise of what can I actually do given my position, my government, my constituency. And I think we all work now within probably two streams. One is the realm of the possible. What can we actually get done now? And what's that low-hanging fruit that we can actually pick right now? But having a broad enough vision that everything we do is moving towards that goal. And we take our opportunities when they come.
And is it getting stronger and more easy, or is it getting harder, do you think, to...
Well, I'm in an interesting place now because, you know, I'm here. I moved to Madrid. I'm going to be living in Europe. And, you know, Vincent, I grabbed him yesterday and said, I'm going to be all over you for the next couple of years. Vincent works in our office in Brussels for ICT. You know, I've got to learn how things work here. And I know the process pretty well in Washington. But I don't know the rhythms of it here or the mechanisms that are available to us, and they're quite different than in the U.S.
Yeah.
And you've got to deal with the individual countries. You're dealing with the organizations, the EU, and there's subtleties there that I have to learn to be as effective as I want to be here.
Yeah.
So I'm a little behind the beat right now.
Yeah. So I ask, more difficult, more easy. It depends on the context, of course. So you have to get to know.
Well, look, you're in a different. Things were radically different when His Holiness won the Nobel Peace Prize. That was a huge leap in our ability to work, and for His Holiness to be able to get it in almost any door at that point. And I think we've been coasting on that for a long time now. It's very rare that doors are closed to us. But, you know,
Yes and no.
but you have to go in the back door sometimes to get there.
Even in the Netherlands. I mean,
Yeah.
the Dutch Prime Minister is not going to receive the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
But maybe in a
Well, I'm wondering, you know, maybe this year, this extraordinary man, Peace Prize winner who is 90, that the mere fact of that milestone may open up some front doors, that this is a special time. We can not be listening so much to the Chinese this year.
Yeah, so looking at China, it's been going up and down a lot, right? So at some point it was very difficult to have criticism on China, or to be critical of China for many people, and now it seems a little bit the wind is turning a bit. It seems a little bit easier.
Well, I think it's only easier in the sense that people have seen that the hopes and dreams, the positive hopes and dreams of what was going to happen in China they were not fulfilled. This successful middle class and more educated, more well-to-do, more kind of wired into a Western lifestyle the government would have to change to accommodate for them. Well, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen, and a lot of young Chinese people are getting out of the country because they don't see a future anymore.
Yeah, so you're seeing high unemployment. You're seeing the bubble is bursting in many ways. This is a rough time for them.
But going back to Tibet, because just from
But that's where the openings, I
that's
think,
where
might
the opening
be.
is. Yeah, so that's
is-
why it's important to look at that.
And we have to change habits because people, we were talking about this today, I think one of the most destructive things has happened. People self-edit now.
Yeah.
They don't even have to be told by the Chinese we're not happy. People think, they're not going to be happy. So I will.
I'm doing research for the European Union about information suppression, transnational information suppression. So not just information suppression within the borders of People's Republic of China, but everywhere. And this is exactly what's happening. It's much more useful and much more. It works out really well if people just don't say certain things, and so many people have been doing that.
Well,
So
language
how
is
to-
dying.
how to
Just the
go
use of language because of this, the overuse of language, you become numb. So I think we all need a different language now. I think we need a different language. Words like love and compassion don't, unless the Dalai Lama says them and they resonate, they don't mean what they used to, because the bad guys use the same words. Language is almost dead now. So the human encounter, which is nonverbal basically, is really what we have to go back to. It's really the hands-on, spending time with each other, where language doesn't become an obfuscator. It becomes a buoy in an ocean. But it allows a more direct kind of wisdom communication to happen. You know, this goes back to the Tibetan. Look, everything I'm finding out now, if you take it back to the Buddhist roots, is the way to move forward, no matter what you're talking about. It's going to work. So a teaching with a High Lama, of course there's language involved, but ultimately what we're talking about is non-conceptual. This kind of wisdom and compassion, as soon as you put words to it, it's diminished. The possibilities are diminished by language. We don't have poetry anymore. You look at ancient poetry and you go, wow, it's like looking at cave paintings. I mean, what was anything better than Lascaux? Is there anything better in art? Picasso said that. You know, first time he said, we haven't learned anything since. The basic poetry, the kind of leap of creativity to create language, and the first use of it is poetry. It's just mind-boggling. But we've lost that.
So how can we get it back? Because in the room here, there are quite a few different generations, older people, a lot of younger people as well. Also from
Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that younger people are here. There's old dinosaurs like me are here, but and Christina, I guess you're another dinosaur like me.
They are necessary.
Yeah, we're necessary. Yeah, we're good fertilizer later on, aren't we? Yeah.
So what can young people?
Yeah, but the future is kids. Of course it
Of course,
is.
yeah.
You know, and we've started programs that I'm really proud of at ICT in Washington. I don't know if we do it in the other offices yet, working with young kids. We do it here? We do it in Brussels. Yeah, great. So it's really, and you should be talking about the process because you're the one who runs it. Tensula, come up and just talk a. Oh, okay, all right.
You have a flight to catch, right, or not? I mean, you're welcome to stay.
Well, she'll
for the whole
talk about it.
evening.
You know what? My wife is going to kill me if I don't get on that plane tonight.
Yeah.
And my kids, I was talking to them and said, "When are you coming home?" So we're talking about this, kids, and it's not just kids, it's bringing them in. It's allowing them to learn. Frankly, we're amongst friends here, but I think this is something that the Tibetans should have done all this time, is really take the best with the real abilities, bring them into what we're all doing, bring them along and see this is how we do it. We've learned how to do this. and teach them the skills of how to represent who they are and what the vision is of possibility. But what we're doing in the ICT offices, I think, is extraordinary. You know, you have to prove yourself. You write an essay and you present yourself, and we have competition. And the best of the young people are coming to Washington, coming to Brussels, I understand, and we take them office to office, and they meet big shots, and they say, "This is how you function here. This is how the system works, and it's how you can be very effective within the system."
So, because I do want you to catch your plane, so I'm going to ask one last question, because I don't want to be responsible for your wife killing you.
But Wampo will be very upset if I leave too soon. Let me see what time it is. No, I got time. I got 10 minutes.
You got 10 minutes. Oh, great. Because I'm going to talk to Wangpo and Tencho quite extensively afterwards, but it's really nice to have you here. I do want to dwell on the new generation, because it seems, of course, every generation is a bit different, because of, well, the first generation fled Tibet and knew Tibet. The next generation only grew up somewhere else, either in Dharamsala or in one of the diaspora communities elsewhere. How would you describe the current new generation, and what do you think their strength is? When we talk about activism on Tibet.
Activism, but I was thinking too about the younger lamas. We have younger lamas like Mingyur Rinpoche and Sokni Rinpoche. I think Ling Rinpoche would still be considered one of the young lamas. They were all trained by the old guys.
Yeah.
So they're the bridges. And they're young enough now. They're in their 30s and 40s. That bridge is still there. And these guys are smart enough and internationalized enough that they can communicate really well in almost any situation. You know, one of my very first teachers was Chungla Ratu Rinpoche, who was, I think he might have been the very first Tibetan to come to New York. Maybe the second. After Texta Rinpoche. I think he might have, yeah, after Texta Rinpoche, he was the second. And he was the prime student, actually, of Ling Rinpoche, who was His Holiness's senior tutor. He was 99 when he passed. And that won't come back.
No.
That is over. But I think they would have said, the generations before, the great yogis, that was over too by then. We're in a different place now, for sure. And I don't know what's going to happen in the monasteries and the nunneries. You know, it's. I think His Holiness bringing science and modern education into the monasteries and nunneries is probably the only way you're going to have successful men and women coming out of those institutions.
Yeah.
So the institutions themselves have to radically change to be in the new world.
And to know sort of how to position yourself in the new world.
How to function. Yeah, how to function and be skillful. I mean, part of being a good Buddhist is being skillful. You know, you make a commitment to help all sentient beings release from pain, but in order to do that, you've got to work on yourself and become skillful. You have to have skills, literally skills, to help people. Otherwise, don't even try.
And what skills did you acquire that are most helpful to help?
It's motivation. It's always motivation. I'm innately and was almost shockingly shy. And a lot of that has gone away because my motivation has gotten deeper, and it's not about me. And a lot of that is just having time around His Holiness and other teachers and the Tibetans. You know, the basic kindness and warm heart of the Tibetans. Realizing you can function that way. You don't have to have armor on all the time to protect yourself. And I think as soon as that process starts to happen, other magical things start to come in. Everything becomes more vast. Your mind becomes more vast. Your feelings become more vast. And the tightness tends to just dissolve.
And that's where art comes in as well. Arts and the right words and everything else. So that's what we're doing here. Wangpo, I'd like to invite you to the stage. And I'd like to thank you very much for this talk. Thank you so much.
Oh, those very different questions too. Thank you.
I would like to thank you for coming to The Hague to participate in this program, in the rally, in the many meetings that we had. You are inspiration. You make us better as a team. There are some players, you see, who sort of have this magic to also develop some sort of performing players in a manner which makes them also better as a team, and that's you. You are inspiring, and you are sort of a great energy for us here. So thank you very much. And even the city of The Hague came to know that you are here, and the municipality sent something. There's a card. I'll put it here in this rucksack. Not in the rucksack, in this bag. And I was told I should tell you that this is also for something for your wife. They said, yeah, so there's something in there.
And The Hague is a city of peace and justice, of course.
Of course. And then, lastly, let me present your card.
Nice. I just like to say that this Wangpo is really an extraordinary guy, and almost all the Tibetans who have taken on, work for the offices of Tibet and ICT and all these organizations that are really trying to do something. But what they do is there's no resources. There's really no help. And, we all kind of do what we can. I come from a different universe, and I'm not worried about putting my kids through college and healthcare and these things. But these guys in the offices still are. And it's a 24/7 job that they do. And I'm just so thankful for Wangpo for being here and coming into a difficult situation and turning it around and doing such positive and creative and wonderful things here. Not only in this country, but taking on all of Europe, which is coming out of the office in Amsterdam. So with great admiration, I just want, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you.
And a great team.
And the whole team, absolutely.